As many sports fans know, player contracts can really affect how a team operates and its overall payroll. More specifically, sport franchises in a league with a hard salary cap, such as the NHL, can really get screwed if they don't manage their player contracts optimally. But it's difficult to do that between player demands and the ever-increasing market, for example. No matter which team you support, it's pretty much a guarantee that you've had to experience your team suffer from a bad player contract. Hey everyone, it's Billy from Puck Rivals, and today I'll be covering the worst contract on each Eastern Conference team in the NHL. Matt has already covered the Western Conference, so be sure to check that out if you haven't yet. Also, to be clear, we did not include players who are on LTIR with no chance of returning, or buyout paid players. Let me know in the comments who you believe has the worst contract on your favorite team, and let's get started with the Boston Bruins. The Bruins are a team who recently have been known to get their key star players on team-friendly deals, including Bergeron, Pastrnak, and Marchand, all making in the $6 to $7 million range. As a result of this, there isn't really many candidates for a bad contract on this team. However, the one that stuck out the most to me was Charlie Coyle. Next year, his 6-year extension will kick in with an AAV of $5.25 million. It's not the most expensive contract, but Coyle is a guy who has only reached 50 points one time in his career and has 43 points in 91 games as a Bruin. Up next, we have the Buffalo Sabres. This team has two contracts that aren't really great, but one definitely sticks out as worse, and that contract belongs to Kyle Okposo. After having a great contract year with the Islanders, Okposo signed a $6 million per year contract with the Sabres. His first 2 years with the team were alright, but as time goes on, this contract gets worse and worse. Okposo only managed to get 19 points in 52 games this year for Buffalo, and has found himself in the bottom 6 forward group. This contract hasn't gone well for Buffalo, paying a 32-year-old $6 million to be in your bottom 6, and he's still got 3 years left. Carolina's worst contract isn't really all that bad, but for this video we have to pick the worst one on their team, and for us it belongs to Jake Gardiner. He is owed a touch over $4 million for the next 3 years, and if this year was any indication, it could be a rough next 3 years. He was more of a defensive liability on the Canes, and had by far the worst plus-minus on the team. Not to mention, he was also on pace for less than 30 points, which he has only done one time in his career before that. The Columbus Blue Jackets are the next team we'll be looking at, and for me there are a few contracts on this team that could end up not looking great for them, but for now I think the title of worst contract belongs to Alexander Wennberg. He is slated to make $4.9 million over each of the next 3 seasons, and he probably doesn't really deserve it. Wennberg has cracked 50 points just one time in his career, as well as only reaching 40 points once as well. Over the last 2 years, he has totaled 47 points over the span of 132 games. That's not the type of production you want from someone being paid $4.9 million. He's still 25, so he's got time to turn it around. Moving on to the Detroit Red Wings, there are 2 contracts that stick out as pretty bad, belonging to Frans Nielsen and Justin Abdelkader. You can't really go wrong with picking either one, but for the sake of this video, we believe the worst contract on the team belongs to Justin Abdelkader due to having one more year than Nielsen. He played in 49 games this year and didn't even score a goal, but he's being paid over $4 million. He doesn't perform anything close to the value of his contract, and he's still got 3 years left at 33 years old. He and Frans Nielsen are owed over $9 million combined the next 2 seasons, and they've got some key RFA signings to make this offseason. Taking a look at Florida, the Panthers have a couple questionable contracts signed to their team, but we believe there's one that is clearly the worst. That belongs to their big free agent signing, goaltender Sergei Bobrovsky. Bob inked a 7-year deal worth $10 million annually last offseason, and boy is that beginning to look like a mistake for Florida. In his first year, he had a pretty bad save percentage of just .900. Sure, the Panthers have a weak D-core, but a $10 million goalie would still have a better save percentage than that. Bobrovsky's 31 and still has 6 years remaining. I feel like signing goalies over 30 to these type of deals isn't the best strategy, and it comes with a lot of risk. He'll really need to turn things around to make this contract worth it even a little bit. Speaking of signing goalies over 30 to long-term deals, the Montreal Canadiens also did this. Carey Price's 8-year deal worth $10.5 million annually kicked in at the start of last year when he was 31. He's 32 now and has 6 years left on this monster contract. I'll try not to be biased, but Price is still one of the best goalies in the world, and he showed it in the playoffs versus Pittsburgh. But this contract is still a huge risk for the Habs. With lots of young talent coming up through the ranks they'll need to sign, and Price is not getting any younger. This deal has the potential to become real ugly for the Canadiens. The next team to cover is the New Jersey Devils. There are 2 contracts on this team that you could choose as the worst. It's really a toss-up as to who you might give the crown to, but personally I'm going with another goaltender in Corey Schneider. He's got 2 years left at $6 million, and well, straight up he's been pretty awful the last few seasons. Yes, he's battled injuries, but he also hasn't even put up good numbers in the AHL. Plus, with the emergence of Blackwood, the Devils basically just have to eat this contract until it expires. Moving on, we have the New York Islanders. The worst contract on this team spent the majority of the season in the AHL as well, and didn't really put up impressive numbers at all. The contract belongs to Andrew Ladd, who has 3 years left at $5.5 million annually. Ladd was a good player, but as soon as he inked that long-term deal with the Islanders in 2016, he hasn't been good enough to justify that contract at all. Playing more games in the AHL the last 2 seasons than in the NHL says enough. Looking at the Rangers contracts, there aren't really any that jump out to me as bad. If I had to pick one, I'd go with Mark Stahl, although there's just 1 year left on that deal. It's the end of a 6-year deal that paid Stahl $5.7 million per year, where most of that time he was pretty much a bottom pair defenseman. It's not so bad anymore with just the 1 year left, but dollar value wise he is definitely not worth the $5.7 million that he'll get paid next year. This contract would probably be the Rangers' worst through most of its entirety though. For the Ottawa Senators, Bobby Ryan is the owner of the worst contract on the team. The Sens are on the hook for 2 more years, paying Ryan $7.25 million each year. Ever since his trade to Canada's capital, he hasn't really lived up to the hype. He had a few decent seasons for sure, but nothing worth $7 million. Especially over the last few years, Ryan has seen a drop off in his play. I do feel for the guy though, as he's dealt with plenty of adversity in his life, including this year when he was placed on the NHL Player Assistance Program. As much as I feel bad for the guy, his contract is still the worst on the team. Next team to cover is the Philadelphia Flyers. The guy that owns their worst contract is not a bad player by any means. I just think he's overpaid. That guy is Kevin Hayes. He is a solid centerman for the Flyers and fits their team really well. But his usual offensive output seems to be anywhere from 40 to 50 points, and he's making over $7 million. Again, I like the player and I think he fits the team. I'm just not sure he's quite worth what his contract pays him. And the guy with the worst contract for the Penguins, well, it's Brandon Tanev. Tanev is just finishing up his first year in his 6-year deal with the Penguins. He's got 5 years remaining at an AAV of $3.5 million. This contract is bad not because of the cash, but because of the term. Tanev is a bottom 6 winger in his late 20s, so I don't quite see the point in signing him to a 6-year deal. Bottom 6 wingers can be easily replaced. However, towards the end of his contract, the Penguins will likely be rebuilding anyways, and the dollar value isn't that absurd. Although the length of this deal still makes me scratch my head. Moving on, we've got the Tampa Bay Lightning. Not too many bad contracts on this team, but for me the worst probably goes to Ryan McDonagh. He's got 6 years left at $6.75 million. Right now, I don't think this contract is too bad, but I think it could be quite bad in the long run. McDonagh is 31 and actually had a pretty poor season, at least offensively, on a pretty stacked team. If this trend continues for him, this contract is going to look uglier as time goes on for the Lightning. The Toronto Maple Leafs are next, and I hope this isn't too controversial, but we think the worst contract for them is their captain, John Tavares. This by no means he's a bad player by any stretch of the imagination, but he'll still be paid $11 million well into his 30s, and the Leafs also don't really have any awful deals that aren't worth their value. Tavares right now is probably worth close to what he's being paid, it's just the term of this contract that could end up being pretty ugly for the Leafs. Last, but certainly not least, we have the Washington Capitals. Another team with not too many bad contracts, but we're going with Nicklas Backstrom as the Caps' worst contract. Some may disagree, but he's already 32 and has 5 years remaining at a shade over $9 million. In his prime, Backstrom was definitely worth this price tag. Even right now, you could argue it's not that bad, but this deal takes him to 37 years old, and he'll still be getting paid $9.2 million. It's for that reason that this contract is the worst on the Caps. I really like the guy, but the term of this deal could really become an issue. Trying to determine the worst contract for each team can be a difficult task. Some don't really have any bad contracts, and some have way too many to decide. But no matter what team you are, it's a problem you'll have to face at some point in time. Leave a comment down below if you agree with our picks, or if you have another idea as to who has the worst contract for any team. Matt has already covered the Western Conference, so if you missed that, don't forget to check that out as well. That's all for today though. This is Billy from Puck Rivals, and I'll see you next time.